Peace, everybody. It is I, the Emma, aka Energy Master Allah, and you are watching the Leopard in the Mirror, Canticle of the Mutant Guardian lecture series. This is episode 13, and today we are starting book 2, The Power of Wisdom, and going into the first canticle of that, the first canto of that particular book, which is King Resurrection. If you don't already have your copy of that book, The Leopard in the Mirror, go ahead, grab that off Amazon. Physical, hold it in your hand. Also, as you know, I record these live on Facebook and then I upload them to YouTube. So if you are watching this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe, like, share it, comment, join the conversation. All right, so like we always do, I'm going to read the canto first, and then we'll go through it and discuss it. All right. So we go over here, book 2, The Power of Wisdom. You know, the first book was all about my descent, going through hell to reveal, revealing the hell one must go through to be right. So I had to go through what I had to go through. So now, the story of the man, now we're moving into the wisdom. In supreme mathematics, of course, the wisdom is the manifestation of the knowledge. What actually physically crystallized as a result of the observations that took place in the first section. All right. Wisdom is the ways and actions one uses to make his or her knowledge known, which includes speaking wisely, the wise, the dumb, and dumb. And wisdom, of course, is symbolic of the woman, which is why you see her here. All right, so let's look at this. Scrolling on down, here we go. Now it comes around. King. All right, there we go. Canto 11. King. Resurrection. 1. The return of the word. The dawn rose not from the east, but from the chest of the man reborn. His silence spoke before his lips moved, for the breath itself had remembered the sound. The word became motion again, a rhythm older than empire, older than the tongue that claimed dominion over the pulse of creation. It said, "Rule thyself, and the world shall follow." 2. The crown of knowledge. He stood upon the ledge of his knowing, feeling the vertigo of infinity. To know the ledge is to see the fall and smile. For what descends returns, and what returns ascends again. He saw the circle as a throne. Its arms and legs formed the name of Allah. Arm, leg, arm, head. 5 points of power multiplied by 72. The measure of the sun's wisdom in one man's body. The king's robe was not velvet, but vibration, woven from equations and breath. Every beat of his heart kept the rhythm of justice. Every thought aligned with the angles of truth. 3. The palace within. No guards, no gates, no gold. Only stillness and the soft hum of awareness. The king was alone with his counsel. Knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, and freedom sat in a perfect square, while love hovered above them like light through glass. They debated the laws of creation, not to rule, but to refine. They remembered power untempered by compassion turns justice to just ice. So the king warmed the throne with empathy, and the frost of arrogance melted from his mind. 4. The rule of resonance. He learned that will is not command, but chord, and every being a string struck by the breath of the Most High. He strummed his own heart, and the cities outside changed key. The waves calmed. The clouds folded back their thunder, and men and women spoke softly again. For when the king is centered, the kingdom finds its rhythm. 5. The father's reflection. From the mirror of the pond a face appeared, not separate but continuous. The father saw the son saw the father, and they both saw light. This was the real resurrection, not return from death, but recognition that death never was. The boy's laughter became thunder, the thunder became understanding, and understanding built the bridge between worlds. Thus the king ruled through compassion, and the storm obeyed, not fear, but harmony. 6. The declaration of the new Renaissance. The king rose from meditation and spoke. Let art be the new law, and love the new economy. Let science serve spirit, and wisdom serve the child. Let nations not be borders, but rhythms in the same song. And those who heard it felt their crowns ignite, a quiet fire at the top of the spine. Each became ruler of their own domain, the atoms within them realigned to the measure of divine proportion. The word king no longer meant throne, but being rightly aligned with truth. Thus ended the tyranny of outside gods, and began the age of inner sovereignty. Closing invocation. The king knelt in the garden of silence. He touched the soil, Allah's own skin. He whispered, "Rule me, mother, that I may rule justly. Let my power be your peace, and my breath be your voice." The wind answered through the trees, "Rise, king of the inner world. Your crown is the conscience of all creation." All right. Let's bring that back up to the top. So, right off top, you should notice that as we move into book 2, it's completely taken the material of book 1 in a recursive manner, and it has started to reconstruct it in a way that solidifies into a state of being. So everything that contributes is just like, let's say you've been working your whole life, towards something, and even if you get knocked off track from that particular trajectory, let's say somewhere down the line you end up accomplishing something, say you're getting honored for some award or something that you couldn't even have fathomed that you would receive, some recognition or just some milestone for you. When that happens, we have a tendency to look back at our lives and a lot of the things that seem like disjointed events or things that were moments that we don't necessarily have the most positive attitude toward, and so on and so forth. At that moment, when you reach that goal, you suddenly see holistically how every single one of those situations, good or bad, contributed to that success right there. You can't see any other way that you could have gotten where you did had your life not happened in that exact sequence of successes and failures. All right. So that's the notion that Canto 11 is starting out on as we go into this book 2. Okay, so it says, so the return of the word of dawn rose not from the east, but from the chest of the man reborn. His silence spoke before his lips moved, for the breath itself had remembered the sound. See, That's, of course, a metaphor for the rising of the sun within you as opposed to the one outside of you. It's the resurrection of memory, which we call remembering, putting the pieces back together of who you truly are, the truth of your divine essence. His silence spoke before his lips moved. That's presence. If you're living in the present, the natural consequence is the exuding of presence. I was looking at earlier today about the element prakti. So that's the Sanskrit interpretation of the earth element. And beyond simply stable form and stability and, physical embodiment and those things that we tend to associate with earth element, it has this profound element of essence, which is expressed through the sense of smell in that particular school of thought. And what it's telling you is, unlike the other elements like water or fire or whatever else that have to make physical, full-bodied contact with you in order for there to be some kind of interaction, the earth element, it is so stable unto itself that it can emanate microscopic quality of itself and be able to interact with you chemically from a distance. So it's able to have an actual physical reaction on you from a distance. Now, this definition, it more closely matches the concept of spirit as it's understood in the Igbo culture in Odinala, because spirit is considered an extension of the physical. It's something that's only made possible by the fact that you have a physical anchor and are able to emanate something from yourself. That's the true essence of the sun. If the sun did not have a physical body to anchor it, none of its functions would be possible. None of what we need from it would be able to reach us. So for the breath, remember breath, pneuma, the spirit itself had remembered the sound. Sound is the sole attribute of the most subtle form of matter, which is Akash, which is space, which is they like to use the word vacuum, but it's not empty. It contains sound, and then once you actually understand what sound is, beyond what you hear when sound is applied to a medium, we hear sound because it's carried by air, or it can be carried through liquids or solids, even better. But most of the sound we hear is primarily carried by the effect of sound on that medium we call air. There's little microscopic, atoms, compounds, and stuff that make up the air, or whatever they haven't crystallized. But that air enables movement. That's the quality that air introduces to the concept. And so sound, there is an element of stillness where the sound exists as a value, a frequency address, if you will, even before it's applied to a medium such that you can perceive that information. So this idea of silence spoke before his lips moved, that's that presence exuding. You are a sound, you are a frequency, and then people can feel that, because when they come in the presence of it, it resonates. They feel it within you, awaken what's already within them. The word became motion again, so it's moving in the air. And then mind you, I didn't even know the Hindu Sanskrit description of how the elements move from one to another in terms of which attribute each stage of that development happens. This just happened organically, like just based on what I already knew in the conversations I was having, it naturally distilled to this. And a lot of my work, especially as of late, is particularly focused on using entirely different methods to see if I still arrive at the same type of conclusions as something. So if something sounds like something you've heard before, if it sounds familiar, that's because it is arising from a shared attractor and constraint that is present in all of us. And at the end of the day, that's what we're supposed to be seeking through spirituality, in reuniting with our awareness of our divinity and our shared divinity, is essentially a cutting down of the noise so that we can see what is the one noise that we all share, the one noise that's emanating all of us at the end of the day. And then understanding on top of that, that sound has no outward manifestation without us to anchor it. So it isn't even necessarily two separate things that are interdependent on each other, so much as only one thing that has only changed forms. That's the original understanding. Like they something fascinating that I came to realize and understand in my researching earlier today is that African systems like Odinala, they there was never a time in that culture that they saw themselves separate from anything else, including God. Like the creator, the unmanifest creator aspect, did what it did in order to be able to start emanating itself into manifestation, and then of that manifestation, eventually we're just another step in that same evolution. And so they were never separate. Then you start having the cultures, once you start moving out of you start moving north and then start moving out of the continent, you start seeing this development of these ideas of being completely separate from the creator. Like, that's one thing, you another thing. Well, that type of situation got so out of control that that's ultimately why yoga ended up coming about. Because yoga, whereas you can look at Odinala as unity, where it was never divided, yoga is reunion. I know the word itself means to yoke, to fasten, union, whatever, but in essence, it's really reunion. Because it's saying that now that you've seen what it's like to be separate, just bring it back together. And that's an important distinction because, I put a lot of thought into what is our relationship as Black Americans to people on the African continent who've never left the African continent, who just been in one particular place and, for countless generations. And this sort of thing is well detailed in a lot of, schools of thought. This idea that you've got the origin, but then you've got to move away from the origin in order to gain experience and wisdom. You got to move away from just the knowledge, just from being the observer, to actually gain an experience, and then you reintegrate the two, which becomes your understanding. And so now you got a mental image that is drawn from both knowledge and wisdom, as opposed to just coming up with your own ideas of knowledge without actually testing it. It's just mad theoretical at that point. And so that's essentially what we are. It's a different sort of thing because we're not just simply Black in terms of freshly emerged from the earth and never decoupled from the very forces that shaped us. It's the equivalent of a fish becoming aware of water, like I always use as an example in several talks, where a fish could live and die without ever knowing that it's submerged in something called water, because it's never known anything outside of it. However, if you snatch the fish out of water and then introduce him to this thing called air, if he was an intelligent fish, he would find himself in a dilemma, because now he realizes that what he thought was a limit. Well, let me take that back. It wasn't even something that he thought was a limitation of his world. It was a limitation he didn't even realize existed. But now there's a certain insight that he has about water, and probably a great appreciation that he has for water once he realizes it exists, because it's been snatched up in the air, and he could have died out there. That tears his gills up. He could have died outside of that water. And so he probably has an appreciation for water like you never would believe. Little astronaut almost died from suffocating up there while he in space. Boy, when he get back down to Earth, he is in love with gravity. He is in love with air. All of that stuff. Because he knows what it's like to have to try to survive without it. Okay. The word became motion again, a rhythm older than empire, older than the tongue that claimed dominion over the pulse of creation. It said, rule thyself, and the world shall follow. You wouldn't be worried about trying to conquer somebody else if you had mastery over yourself, because it's infectious. I'm telling you, when you've got yourself together, it just has a natural attraction from those who want to get themselves together, because it's like you're attuning for it. When you've got yourself attuned to the same frequency that shaped this universe in the first place, people who aren't aware of that, they will gravitate towards you first. But what will happen is that through you, they discover that same thing within themselves. They just need you to help them calibrate it, recognize, be able to taste the flavor of it, so that once they're alone and they go within, they feel it there too. Okay, and the important thing that this chapter is really bringing to the surface, and then why it's centered around king, this concept that we have of king. Oh, we were all kings and queens in Africa and so forth. I'm not going to say you wrong. I'm not going to say you right. But most people, when they say that, they're saying that with a very Eurocentric understanding of what a king does and who a king is. You think it's ruling over somebody, when to rule is to be a ruler like a measuring stick. You are the example that they seek to measure up to. Most of the way that you've seen empire is such that people only know how to hold their position by keeping everybody else from getting to that position. And I grew up a hip hop artist. And you know how it is out there with it's people, they competing. Like there's not enough food to go around, so you got to cut this dude's throat in order to be able to get your position. But see, the thing was, when I was hanging around folks like George Clinton, it became obvious that there was another dimension outside of competition. It was to become something so uniquely you that it can't be duplicated. That whatever it is that you give, Nobody can just run next door and get a substitute. One of the best qualities about me, which I had to come to learn and find, is that I don't know what I am. Like, I could do so many things. And so what ends up happening is the best they could do is just describe me as, hey, that's me. And all of these things come along with it. So I don't care which single one thing that you're good at. I'm able to access every single one of them. I'm working toward being a complete human being. And it's through that completion that you are able to recognize what completion feels like in general so that you can have it within yourself. That's what I strive to do and strive to be. That's why I create something like this. The crown of knowledge, it says, he stood upon the ledge of his knowing, so knowledge, to know the ledge, so the ledge of his knowing, feeling the vertigo of infinity. So high up you feel infinite. To know the ledge is to see the fall and smile, for what descends returns, and what returns ascends again. So this is actually based on a very real experience that I had. This is well before I started training an out-of-body experience. And, this was just in meditation, but I had this experience where I went to a location that, I found out was called Kailash, was called, like, this is a real concept, but then I had no awareness of this before this experience. It was just, I was at this place, it looked a certain type of way. Certain words were said during that experience, and when I actually went online afterward to look it up, it turned out to be a real concept, a real thing. So I was like, whoa, okay, so we might have something here. But anyways, it was the first time I had an experience with a being, like I was up at this temple, and then there was this Buddha, but it wasn't like, it was just like a floating version of the statue, and it looked almost radioactive or something. And the way it occurred to me was as if I wasn't talking to a person so much as a recording. Like, it was a space where anybody doing that, that type and level of meditation that they could go to, that they could visit. So it's a stable spiritual / virtual space is what I guess I'll call it. And what I was instructed to do was walk out of the temple and then out to the edge. So it was like Chris, I'm out on this mountain, I'm out on this edge, this ledge right here. And he says to jump down. So it's basically, it's supposed to be a bottomless pit, or whatever. Essentially is what I understand from him, even without him saying it. Like, it's just kind of being transferred directly. And so without hesitation, I jump off of it. I was like, okay. I had no fear or anything else. And so what happens is I'm falling. It's dark. And it's very vivid, very, very real. Not quite as real as an out-of-body experience. I say I'm probably about 50 in and out or whatever. Still aware of my body and presence in the room, but, being able to kind of, be able to see this experience and feel it pretty clearly. And so I'm falling, and then at some point, and then I say that to say that you feel the same kind of sensation, like your adrenaline is up and you pumping because, your brain can't tell the difference. And so anyways, there comes this point where I've been falling so long, and me knowing that there's no bottom to this thing, I don't have any fear of hitting the bottom. And so when you're falling long enough, you get so used to it that it feels like it's standing still. And during the fall, I was even on fire. I had been falling so hard and so fast that there was a flame at first, and I could feel that. But then after a while, after burning for so long, you also get used to it. So ultimately, what I was being shown and what I was being taught before I could move on from that particular stage was that all of these types of sensations are united within my form. That you as a human soul, you as a human being, you are the culmination of all these independent processes that have happened throughout the universe being condensed into one experience. So your body generates warmth. You're in a constant free fall of gravity toward the center of the earth. There's all these different elemental experiences that you embody into one thing, and it is because you bring them all together that it almost seems as if you're neither. You see, but you are the manifestation of that experience of being the all, as opposed to the unmanifest source of that experience. Okay, so there's something unique and essential to getting to the point where, while embodied, you experience what it's like to be everything. Not everything as in something that's out there, but everything condensed and compressed into one location. He saw the circle as a throne, its arms and legs forming the name of Allah. Arm, leg, arm, head, 5 points of power multiplied by 72. The measure of the sun's wisdom in one man's body. So this is arm, leg, arm, head, that 5-point star. That's your design. 5 times 72 is 360 degrees. You got 360 degrees in both the circle and the square. All right, so like I said earlier, this resurrection we're talking about is a function of remembering. And if you listen to that word, member, your arms, your legs, those are your members, your appendages. So to remember seems to imply the idea of bringing the members back together. So you piece yourself back together. You find in the pieces of you. You've been fractalized all throughout this reality into thinking that thing, this thing, that, whatever else is separate from you. But once you start to understand how they're connected to you, what's the common thing we all have, then you start to recognize what is really you. What part of you is equal in all things and all aspects of life. The king's robe was not velvet, but vibration, woven from equations and breath. Every beat of his heart kept the rhythm of justice. Every thought aligned with the angles of truth. So just like what I was saying before, where you're more like a tuning fork, a measuring stick, than you are somebody that has to impose your rule on others. The sun does not need to chase the planets. Because the sun is what it is, the planets move accordingly. You don't need to wear a certain badge or a certain outfit or whatever else, because people know you're the king by your vibration. When they come upon you, they feel the resonance of that thing that is common to both of you. That becomes his role. In case you haven't noticed, and in case it hasn't become apparent throughout this, there's a lot of elements about this book that are essentially, in a lot of ways, my answer to Black Panther as a story, as a franchise. What does it mean to be a ruler in Wakanda? What does it really mean to be king? And some of the questions that were brought up in, T'Challa's interactions with Killmonger in the film adaptation, is these certain questions that we have. Now, could M'Jadaka, aka Killmonger, could he have been a better ruler had that hatred he had in his heart, which many felt was justified, but still, if he had dealt with that war within himself first, you may ask the question, would he have even had the passion to, come in there and, claim birthright or whatever else? But above and beyond that, what happens when you give somebody power without refinement? And that's the question we start asking in this coming section. The palace within, no guards, no gates, no goal, only stillness and a soft hum of awareness, learning to value those things. Because if you can't sleep at night, why is you doing what you're doing? The king was alone with his council. Not some external council. His council wasn't placed in people. You can have people that embody these qualities, but because he has the knowledge of self, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding and culture, specifically the culture of freedom, which is our God, our self, Lord, and Master, that becomes his perfect square. Remember I told you, 360 degrees can either be a cipher or it could be a square. The difference between the two is that the square is something you can stand on. The cipher may be a reflection of who you are, but the square, your square, the truth you stand on, it encompasses who you are, who you could be, what you've been, what they could be, who they could be. Because that truth is true even despite you, even without you there. What's true is true. It rings as true, it feels true, it tastes true. While love hovered above them like light through glass, remember love and understanding are one and not two separate qualities. So this is the mental image, the hologram, the holographic projection that they see and that they sense off of the person who is built like this within. They debated the laws of creation not to rule but to refine. They remembered power untempered by compassion turns justice to just ice. Remember, that's to be frozen, stuck in or at equality. So the king warmed the throne with empathy, and the frost of arrogance melted from his mind. He put that hubris aside. I ain't got to think nothing of myself if myself is properly refined, because it speaks volumes for itself. When it said knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and culture, these first four values are debating the laws of creation. This is a reference to the four elements. Until they learn to meet in the middle in order to do exchange, in order to do trade, they're constantly in conflict with each other. There's no stability to be seen. If you don't have a stable ground to stand on, that's why you go from being the cipher, the circle, to being the square, having four corners. These four elements. So once they're stabilized, you got something you can stand on. You can stand upright. Because what it took is solidifying a recognition of self for the original man to stand on his own two, look around him and say, I am. It took balancing out those forces of sound, tangibility, and fluidity, form and visibility. Movement. It took all of these qualities being centered for him to become something solid and self-recognizing that is recognized from a distance. The rule of resonance, he learned that will is not command but chord, and every being a string struck by the breath of the Most High. We all playing a singular song that is heard through emergence by all of them coming together and working in unison. Just like that polyphonic singing you hear in forest tribes and stuff in the Congo, or there's some other types of music throughout the world that are somewhat imitative of that. But there's certain tones and a certain central concept that emerges when you have all of those notes in the right place with the right timing. He strummed his own heart, and the cities outside changed key. The waves calmed, the clouds folded back their thunder, and men and women spoke softly again. For when the king is centered, the kingdom finds its rhythm. So that's one thing. So at the part that I'm on, I've read at least the majority of Ta-Nehisi quotes. I forget how you pronounce his first name, Ta-Nehisi. Look like it's Ta-Nehisi, but it's Ta-Nehisi. Quotes his run on the Black Panther, and one thing that consistently stands out about T'Challa is that he's constantly having internal conflict between the scientist that he is and the responsibility that he has to uphold tradition and religion and things of that nature in his kingdom in order to be able to keep order. So a lot of times we often don't think about the consequence that we may be bringing to a situation by introducing knowledge that people aren't ready for. It doesn't matter how much water you pour for people that aren't ready to drink it. Because water is often mentioned alongside wisdom, which is experience. You got to learn how you resonate and how you move and how you look before people can feel you. Because you want them to recognize you when they see you. Every time when they see you, they know that's you. They know your flavor. Like I know we incorporated a lot of these terms just as slang, but then the fact that the way that they developed as slang in our vernacular in the black neighborhoods, the fact that it actually resonates with these higher spiritual concepts from around the world, that should tell you something. People wasn't just sitting around making stuff up. It was something that emerged from the essence of who we truly are. You know what I mean? But yeah, so T'Challa, he constantly has that internal conflict between those two things. And right now, in the book, his sister... Hold on, I spelled this all extra wrong. I feel like it's supposed to have one S and two R's in resurrection. Well, y'all ain't say nothing. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Let me fix it. Let me be right and exact. That feels much better. That's because I'm looking at it, I'm like, resurrection. No, it's resurrection. Resurrection. Yeah, all right. And so, but yeah, sure, she's had a time out because, they thought she was basically subjected to what they call the living death, which is a type of stasis that they also put Thanos in. But then while she was out, she went on a kind of ancestral journey type of situation in the meantime, and basically gave her clarity. So upon her return, she now she's kind of helping to navigate the conflict that's going on because of some uprisings and things that have been happening in Wakanda in the story. Basically have people, kind of wanting democracy and stuff in Wakanda as opposed to, the royal rule, but that's mostly been because you've had outside influences coming in basically tricking people into thinking that the royal house was doing things to them that wasn't they weren't really doing to them, and so it was just made into this whole thing about down with the monarchy altogether and so on and so forth. So it's interesting the types of ideas that have come together from black authors who have looked at the larger scope of the history of black people on this planet, and then recognize how these things are manifested. Okay, from the mirror of the pond, a face appeared, not separate but continuous. The Father saw the Son saw the Father, and they both saw light. This was the real resurrection, not return from death, but recognition that death never was. So we want to cling on to our loved ones when we lose people. And that's mostly because in our language, we have become programmed to look at death as loss instead of a shift in form. And it tends to prevent us from seeing the impact that people have when they leave here. And in a weird way, you could say that part of the appeal in Christianity is that people are drawn to the power that Jesus had in death. Now, I'm not going to, comment on the theology or anything else, but even if you just looked at it as a person who lived his life greatly, and when he died, it transformed several people's attitudes. Like you had the Roman soldier who said, man, this man was truly God, or whatever else. Yeah, hindsight is 2020. Everybody sees it clearly once you're gone. And so it was one of those situations where, he was more appreciated dead than he was alive. That's pretty much what y'all doing now, like 2,000 years later. If Jesus was walking around as he is, you say you react one way, but if you saw Buddy out here walking on water and turning water into wine and different stuff like this, the way that the narrative goes, and then mind you, a lot of these things aren't in the original writings about these are things that kind of developed over time in the writings. But if you saw somebody doing that today, you'd be quick to call them a witch or a devil or whatever else. That's exactly what happened during this time. Like a lot of people, they're like, oh no, that ain't right. I don't know who he's sourcing his stuff. I pray every day and I can't turn no water into wine. Or they're like, y'all would do Jesus dirty nowadays if you ran into him off top. And you hadn't had 2,000 years to be prepped for it. You know what I'm saying? Now, another aspect that is very central to this particular chapter is that this concept of it's not flesh and blood that we wrestle, but principalities. This thing that appears in Paul's letter now, it's a strange evolution that it took, because it even later on, in more Gnostic interpretations, it even took on this idea of these principalities, these and the word archons, so arche and archons. These all mean the exact same thing, and it's not referring to external. Well, all right, let me put it this way. So based on the definition of spiritual and spirit that I gave just a minute ago in terms of it being an extension of the physical, if you're going to look at these as spiritual forces, as opposed to you looking at it as something preceding us that is controlling our actions, you look at it as, here's something that we came together as humans and started doing, and did it so often and intensely that that thing became a recognizable group behavior, such that we have a thing called empire or hierarchy or whatever else, these emergent systems, right? And so what ended up happening was those emergent systems of specifically the Roman Empire and just these different aspects of the group human experience, they came to be applied metaphorically to God, the angels, these different aspects. So it wasn't, there isn't somebody sitting up there on the throne and raining down. That wasn't the original idea of it. Like there's very stable forces at play, but then those same forces can be interpreted in a number of ways. So the type of hierarchy and the kingdom and whatever other language, whatever that comes later in scripture, is because this is being retroactively applied to human understanding of the forces that are shaping our actions. They're not something independent of us. It is something that we've chosen to interpret in a way that manifested what we see as empire today and the consequences of that. And so the weirder part of the story is that when, you know how memes can take a life of their own. A meme, essentially, by the definition that I've given, is essentially what a spirit is. And so enough stable concepts or memes or repeatable, ideas, if enough of those are combined, they become a bigger idea. Just like I take a bunch of different character archetypes and I put them in one story. So that story can in and of itself have a spirit unto itself. And that can turn into a franchise. And then each of the individual entries in said franchise define the spirit. So it's a bottom up type of thing. Your global manifestation of your outward body is the culmination of everything that the individual cells and the shared DNA within them are doing. All right. So your outward appearance isn't printed in the middle of the cell, but your outward appearance is the natural consequence of those cells operating on that information. And so the way the world reacts to you and the world and the life you build for yourself as a result of how the world interfaces with you on your global manifestation of yourself, that's ultimately what starts shaping your spiritual, your spiritual body, your spiritual experience. All right, so just kind of understanding how empire was there first, and then it became applied to the spiritual conversation, because there was a time when you had elaborate spiritual systems who did not look at it as a hierarchy with this who ruled over that or ruled over this. There wasn't even really a good versus evil initially, not because there wasn't bad things that happened, quote unquote, but it was understood that things just happen in nature or whatever. The lion doesn't kill the gazelle because he's evil. He kills because that's his instinct and he's hungry and he gotta eat. That's what he was made to eat. And as a result, in those older stories, evil just simply meant that you were different. It just meant that you went against the grain of what was the norm at the time. So you were an outcast and so on and so forth. And so that just gradually developed into, the kind of binary that we see now between good and evil. And why does that happen? Well, we live in a digital era. Everything is binary. Everything's based on binary code, ones and zeros. And so it just so happens that because of the way that information naturally organizes itself, a country like the United States is so dominant in the world because it was founded on a binary between black and white people. White people have this status, black people have that status. Everybody else, they just kind of, get in where they fit in between those ones and those zeros. And so because the foundation of the country was built on that, it don't matter what kind of superficial changes that you make about this place. It's just more efficient and more effective when it is reduced to these broad categoristic binaries. I'm not saying that it's good or it's bad. I'm just saying that this place basically runs just like how a computer works. So if you know a little thing about information sciences and information theory and the way that information itself behaves, you realize that that's basically what they shaped this place to be, to operate more like a digital system than one that is attuned with nature and accepting of nature and reconciles both polarities of nature. The boy's laughter became thunder. The thunder became understanding, and understanding built the bridge between worlds. Thus the king ruled through compassion, and the storm obeyed not fear but harmony. So that's hearkening back to the concepts in the end of the previous book, where I was noticing that it wasn't that I was controlling the weather. Not that I literally thought it, but the recognition that people who have been perceived as controlling the weather in the past could have just easily been so in sync with nature and the timing of nature that they perform an action in perfect harmony with that nature, such that somebody from the outside looking in might interpret that as you controlling the nature as opposed to flowing with it. Like, you just predicting everything. No, I'm just moving the same way that nature moves. So naturally it's going to look like what I'm doing is in sync with what's happening, as if I knew what was going to happen over there or something. But I just focus on myself, making sure I'm right and that I'm in balance and harmony. And so, of course, understanding is symbolic of the child. So it's constantly bringing in this concept of the child archetype, because the child is the bridge between the mother and the father. It's the bridge between the heaven aspect and the earth aspect. And it's not simply just a bridge, like a physical bridge being born between them. It's an interface. It's a reconstructible path towards a connection between the two. So it's more like, rather than being a bridge, it's more like the seed from which the tree can grow, and that the wood of the tree can be used to build a bridge. So technically, depending on the length of the gap, if you've got a pocket full of seeds, you got 20 seeds in your pocket. Technically, you got 20 bridges. Because you've seen long time ago where there was sometimes when bridges were just as simple as a very large tree being felled and knocked over, such that it connects both sides of that gap. So if you think of it that way, I don't have to carry 20 bridges, because I understand that 20 seeds will grow into 20 bridges. I know you're impatient, but if you at least understand it on that level, you'll see more value in some of the more subtle places, some of those places that you tend to discount. All right. The king rose from meditation and spoke. Let art be the new law, and love the new economy. Let science serve spirit, and wisdom serve the child. Let nations not be borders, but rhythms in the same song. What is art? At the end of the day, it is the distilling of human thought into tangible form. Art can be representational, but it is an organization of attractors, such that if I put enough things within proximity of each other, there's an inherent part in the human perception that will bring those objects together to say that is a picture. So even in abstract art, people are able to assemble within themselves some meaning that they draw from their art. And so in that regard, if the new law is to bring things close enough together to where people can see themselves within it, and that proximity allows exchange. When I say love is the new economy, understanding is the crystallization of a picture of two seemingly opposing sides manifesting the thing that is the bridge between them, the seed that is the connection between them, the path between them. And if we understand exchange in that way, now you've got a new system with regards to what we value. Let science serve the spirit. It isn't constraints to stop spirituality. It's the rules we choose to operate within, such that what we consider to be spiritual is more stable, and it better serves us. Because when spirituality is constantly tearing you apart, you are mistaking it for something else other than what it should be serving. And wisdom served the child. So wisdom is the ways and actions. Does it serve the image that reflects the knowledge within, or does it impede it? Does your language properly represent the knowledge from which it is manifesting? Or does it cause misunderstanding? The mother and the child, the wisdom and the understanding. Let nations not be borders, but rhythms in the same song. We talk about geography, which with fixed location or whatever else, as opposed to resonance, phase state. The same people living in the same geographical location can be a gift to the world, or they can be a bane on the world. It can be a boon or a bane. It all depends on what phase they're in, because once they move in this one thing, whatever phase they locked in, that's how they occur to the rest of the world, and that's the effect that they have on the rest of the world. And so you could be a part of the same phase and not even live in the same location. And so the internet today makes it a lot more possible for those people in distant geographical locations to actually connect based on being of the same phase and flavor. And those who heard it felt their crowns ignite. Acquired fire at the top of the spine. Each became ruler of their own domain. Your domain is your body, is your cipher. You ain't trying to control nobody else's. So once that crown ignite, that's where you feel your connection with all things. It's not some mystical stuff. It's literally once you realize that connection with all things, your whole system operates different. The atoms within them realign to the measure of divine proportion, understanding that you are the divine. You just got things clouding your vision of it. The word king no longer meant throne, but being rightly aligned with truth is what I've been saying through this whole thing. Thus ended the tyranny of outside gods and began the age of inner sovereignty. When you realize that you As a species, we created gods as a result of our collective actions that cause certain behaviors of ours to become emergent forces other than the forces that naturally occurred to bring us into being in the first place. Once you realize that, you're able to end the tyranny of such things simply by not subscribing to it. You gotta have inner freedom before you can have outer freedom. The king knelt in the garden of silence. He touched the soil, Allah's own skin, that's the earth spirit. And he whispered, "Rule me, mother, that I may rule justly. Let my power be your peace and my breath be your voice." When our people would move to a new area, they would create a pact with the land. They would create a device with natural materials that allowed them to read the vibrations of the earth herself. And this trained individual would then understand the land law. So you're basically making a pact with this land that you're going to take care of it, you're going to respect it. It then informs you in one way or another how to take care of it, what things are available to you there, which things to eat, which things not to eat. Not for some religious reason, but because if you eat those berries on that bush over there, you will die. So it was common sense guidance. If you mix this thing with that leaf over there or whatever, it'll help you heal this particular ailment. They had this type of communication with the earth. It's actually way more scientific than you would think. It's just that they were so attuned to this and it was so regular part of their experience that the language surrounding it wasn't necessarily as specialized in, in what we might think, but the language captures a lot of information, but it just from, Western standards or whatever, it wouldn't be the type of descriptor that, your local academic would be able to use to derive from it an understanding of how advanced the practice actually is beyond just some superstition. And a lot of people performing that practice may only understand it through some kind of superstitious understanding, which is why I gave the earlier example of how we have to be separated so that we can see it from the outside in, and then be reintegrated so that we can bring new wisdom to it to be able to explain exactly what we're doing and be able to do it more efficiently. The wind answered through the trees, "Rise, king of the inner world. Your crown is the conscience of all creation. You become an example, a central example to all others." And this is something we should all be striving to be, no matter what kind of man you are. Black man, white man, woe man. Rise and become the ruler of your inner world. Don't let outside forces control you, but at the same time, this isn't a matter of being stubborn. It's about submitting to your own divinity, because it already has the keys, it already has the answers, it already has your destiny. And the more you resist your own destiny, you ain't got nobody else to blame for things going out of whack and out of awry. You being somebody that you ain't supposed to be. Give in to being who you are supposed to be, and at the end of the day, you are arm, leg, arm, head. Alright? So on that note, we'll catch you in the next one. Canto 12, where we'll get into Love Hill Right. I'll see you next time. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Peace.